Nearly 6 years after the end of a civil war in Sri Lanka that killed an estimated 100,000 civilians, the country is still trying to recover. During this untelevised war, thousands of children as young as 9 years of age were taken from schools and enlisted as soldiers.
Right. It was a war between a separatist movement, the Tigers, and they were representing, roughly the Tamil community, and there was a majority government that was trying to hold on to the territory, and the Tigers did control land and territory for a good amount of time. 30% of the movement were women. And then in 2009, the government took a different approach, that they wouldn't engage in a political conversation and just sort of went all out militarily. And so there was a huge humanitarian crisis in 2009 where it's estimated that 100,000 civilians were killed in 6 months by the shelling. And they did wipe out the Tigers. And the civilians were kept in internment camps. A lot of those were women. And the female Tigers were taken to detention camps. And now Tamil women, the Tamil people, live under military occupation.
That was Nimmi Gowrinathan, a Sri Lankan American activist. Dr. Gowrinathan is an expert on gender and violence and has worked to support education and rehabilitation for women in Sri Lanka. Though nonprofits and individuals like Nimmi have stepped into the country in efforts to rehabilitate and educate children and adults who suffered during the war, she says that minority groups like the Tamil people, particularly women, are still struggling with little hope for the future.
There's a new fear of sending your daughters to school because the military is there on the way to school, and so you don't want her to have to go through a checkpoint. There is an increase in drug use that the military has brought into these areas. So a lot of the young boys are on various types of drugs, and that's a source of concern. So again, the young women are not going to school. In terms of their expression, I think there's a report that we just wrote that's here today. It's called The Forever Victim, with my colleague, who's a human rights lawyer. And he basically looks at how sexual violence in Sri Lanka for Tamil women has been used to keep them sort of trapped without any political agency by the community, by the state, and by the NGOs, who are really just offering them beauty salons and chickens and cows and pastry making things. But that Tamil women at this moment really are sort of, despite there being some resistance on the ground, they are caught in this sort of trap where they can't really express their politics in any real way.
So what about girls who do want more? What about girls who do want that education, who want more than the salon? How do they get it?
I think they're leaving. Everybody's trying to leave the country. I think that most people think the only real chance right now for, if you're a Tamil in Sri Lanka, for real life, for real education, is to leave the country.
With the threat of imminent brain drain on the country, the future for the economy and opportunity for former child soldiers wallows in the balance.
Well, I think for some people, Sri Lanka is sort of this small island that nobody really knows about or understands, but for me it is an example, and particularly Tamil women, it's an example of the experience that women have had everywhere and of our failures. It's an example post-tsunami about how the humanitarian complex sort of failed these women. It's an example of how R2P doesn't really work when civilians are about to get slaughtered. It's an example of the UN walking away when the situation got political. It's an example of the war on terror and how it maps onto other countries and how it destroys civil liberties for women in other countries. So even without having a specific interest in Sri Lanka is a very important case to understand all of the ways that our systems are failing women around the world.
Reporting from New York City, Jenny Abamu, IEN.